In this video, we are going to be shifting gears into solids. So our essential questions are, what is a solid? What are the types of solids? And what are the parts of a solid? So what is a solid? In geometry, a solid is a three-dimensional figure made up of two-dimensional shapes. So we've been talking about these basic two-dimensional shapes in geometry, and now what we're going to do is assemble them into three-dimensional shapes. And here are the shapes we are going to be discussing. We've got prisms, spheres, cones, cylinders, cubes, and pyramids. So first of all, what are the types of solids? Well, as I just mentioned, we have prisms. That is one family of solids, and these are two examples of prisms here. And then we have pyramids. These are examples of pyramids here. We have cylinders. We have cones. And we have spheres. So what are the differences between all these different types of solids? So first, let's talk about what a prism is. A prism is a three-dimensional shape made from two identical polygons called bases, and then the sides are all rectangles. So these two bases, these two identical bases, are connected by rectangles. So when we have a prism, you're always going to find two identical bases. So in this large example here, these rectangles are the bases. So they're identical and parallel to each other. So these are considered the bases of our prism. And then notice that all the sides, or the walls, I guess you could say, of this prism are all rectangles. Well, since the bases are rectangles, every part of this prism is a rectangle. But if you'll look below, we have many different types of prisms. You can basically make a prism out of any type of polygon. So here we have a triangular prism where we would have, if you could imagine kind of in the background there, we've got two identical triangle bases, and then all of these sides would be rectangles. So that's called a triangular prism. So every prism is named after the shape of its base. If its base is a triangle, it's called a triangular prism. If the base is a rectangle, it's called a rectangular prism. As you can see right here, we have a rectangular prism. Here is a special rectangular prism called a square prism. That's when the base or the bases are squares, so you could have the base in the background there as well. Then we've got a pentagon as the base. This would be a pentagonal prism or pentagonal prism. I guess there's two ways to pronounce that. We have a hexagonal prism or a hexagonal prism. That's when the hexagon is the base. And again, notice all of these sides are rectangles that connect the two identical bases. And then we have one missing in between here. That would be a seven-sided shape, that septagon or septagonal prism. And then here's an octagonal prism or octagonal, depending on how you pronounce that, prism. So it would be two identical octagons connected by rectangles. So the key to a prism is it has two identical bases. That differs from what we call pyramids. A pyramid is a three-dimensional shape that has only one polygon base, and then all of its sides are triangles that come to a single point. So here we can see that this has one base, that's a square, and then all of the sides are triangles. So that's different than a prism. A prism has two bases and all the sides are rectangles, and a pyramid has one base and all of its sides are triangles that come to a single point. So again, we have different types of pyramids. Again, they're named after the shape of their base. Here would be a triangular pyramid with a base right here, that's a triangle, and then all these triangles come to a single point here. Here's a square pyramid where the base is a square, and they all the triangular sides come to a single point. Here would be a rectangular pyramid where the base right here is a rectangle and all the sides come to a single point. All the sides are triangles. Again, here's that pentagonal pyramid where you've got a pentagon for the base and all the triangle sides meet at a point. Hexagonal has a hexagon for a base and all of the triangular sides meet at a point. And octagonal pyramid here as well. So we've got prisms and pyramids and the difference between them there. Next, the next solid that we have is a cylinder. And a cylinder is basically like a prism, but it has circular bases. So it's a three-dimensional figure with two identical circle bases. So if you could imagine a prism with circle bases, that's basically what a cylinder is. So you can see these two circles are identical, and then they're connected here by this tube that connects the two bases there. So that's basically all a cylinder is. And then we've got cones, which we can kind of think of as a pyramid with a circle base. So it has one circular base, and the sides all come together here and meet at a single point up there, and that's called the vertex of the cone, FYI. And then lastly, the last solid that we're going to talk about are spheres. And a sphere is just a three-dimensional circle or a ball. So if you can just imagine that three-dimensional circle, you have a sphere. So what are all the parts of a solid? So solids have pieces and parts, and we need to know the names of those. And the first one would be the base. We've been talking about bases before. And the base is really something that defines a solid. It really describes what type of solid you're talking about. So it's important to be able to identify the base. Now with this rectangular prism here, it's hard to tell which one's the base because all the sides are rectangles. So really when it comes to this, it doesn't matter what shape we call the base. So here we would have this, maybe this side right here is the base. This one, however, below it, this prism, the triangles are the bases. They're the two identical shapes that are connected by rectangles. So these are the bases there. Here in this pyramid, it only has one base with triangle sides, so that's the base. And then this one here is the triangular pyramid that has one base as well. So those are all the bases on these shapes. Next, we have parts that are called edges, and these are the line segments that connect all of the parts together. So this would be an edge right here or an edge here. All of these are edges. So basically, if I were to trace the outline of a solid, I'm basically tracing all of the edges on the solid. So here, these are all edges here. And then here, these are all edges. So any of those line segments that connect the parts of our solid together, these are all edges. And then we have faces, and a face is any flat part. It's all of the polygons that make up the solid are faces. So the face, the base is a face, it's a special face, and then it's got other faces as well. So like this top part would be a face, this part would be a face, this side over here is a face. So all of these flat parts to your solids are faces. All these triangles would be faces on our pyramids. These are all faces here. And then lastly, we have a vertex. And a vertex is where two line segments come together. So these are all points. And again, the plural for this, vertices. So all of these points here would be vertices of our solid. So all the corners on your three-dimensional solids are called vertices, or a single one is called a vertex. And there we have all the pieces and parts of our solids. So be able to identify what a solid is, what its bases are, and all of its parts, bases, edges, faces, and vertices.